It's lively and unrehearsed. We call it Moral Side of the News. It's our weekly discussion program, and we're glad you're here. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel: Dr. Marian Taylor, South Frankfort Presbyterian Church; Rabbi Emeritus Stan Miles, faculty, Louisville Melton School; and Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. COVID-19 is still very much in the news. Few, if any, spectators will be allowed at the Tokyo Olympics later this month due to a surge there. And we begin today in Louisville with health leaders reporting 5 confirmed cases of the highly contagious COVID Delta variant, called by some as COVID on steroids. They say the actual number of Delta cases in the city is, quote, likely much higher. And if you're unvaccinated, you're at an increased risk of becoming severely ill, hospitalized, and dying from this variant. Meantime, 4 Governor Scholars students at Blim University have tested positive for COVID-19. They are among 9 unvaccinated teens who have been sent home from this program for the top high school students in the Commonwealth. So turning to our panel on Moral Side of the News, and clearly, panel, we're not out of the woods yet on COVID-19.
No, we're not. And I think while it's true that the vaccine protects us from a serious case, hospitalization, and death for the most part, that's not good enough for some of us. We still don't want to get it. So, there are precautions and wearing masks and so on, distancing, being careful, that I think are still recommendable in certain circumstances. But I want to say another thing, and I've tried very hard not to be or to sound judgmental, because I know people who have chosen not to get the shots for reasons that are important to them. But I also, my husband is a chief medical officer at a hospital. And so I hear things that with a certain forcefulness that other people may not hear. So I want to say that viruses mutate because they have hosts. If we deprive the virus of hosts, it can't mutate. We're going to have more and more versions of this virus, and they could get worse if we don't all get vaccinated. By getting vaccinated, you provide a degree of protection for the whole world. And so I think that is a real moral consideration. One needs to hold one's own reasons up against that prospect of a disease that can continue to evolve and cause havoc in people's lives and kill people. So be sure that when you decide, if you decide not to get the vaccine, that you have weighed that decision against the gravity of a situation like this.
Good. I would agree with you, Marian, on that. The main issue seems to be in all of this about the virus is the main moral issues, as you pointed out, I think is how mandatory can it be to receive a vaccine? The whole thing of being mandatory. We have rights and privileges in this country, and I've heard a lot of people who would voice against the vaccines, not for medical reasons, but for just reasons. Okay, I don't like it. I know some brother priests who still have not been vaccinated, though the majority have. But rights and privileges in this country are wonderful. This is what we die for, in sense of military service and all this, to protect such. But there are no rights and privileges in this country, Constitution or otherwise, that is absolute, in the sense of even with the common good approaches an absolute status, I would say. But even there are certain moral guidelines and moral fences, as use the terminology, that would preclude even the common good as being the absolute right. So when someone says, I have a right not to vaccinated, well, that may be the case at the present time, but the scenario of seeing this variant or another future variant overcoming the vaccines that we've already taken, can certainly anticipate the movement from the federal government in regards to the mandatory aspect of vaccination. We do have almost mandatory vaccinations in a lot of other aspects of life, school for the kids, et cetera. Our second topic, Reverend Massie, and all that about the military. I mean, that's mandatory. I mean, I'm sorry, but so the aspect of something being mandatory is not foreign to the way of life in this country, given the common good status. That would be my introductory comments.
I agree with what both of you have said, and I'm thinking I'm going to make an analogy here. I can't just get in a car and drive the car on the highway. I have to get a license. If I don't have the skill set to pass the driving test, I don't have a license. I don't have a right to drive. It's mandatory that I get a driving license. And this, to me, is virtually the same thing because it's a matter of life and death. If I don't know what I'm doing behind the wheel of a car and drive the wrong way on an expressway and, God forbid, kill some innocent people, that's a crime. And to me, it's equally a crime if a person chooses not to get vaccinated and exposes himself or herself to another innocent human being, and that person gets sick and dies. Of course, the way things work, you would never know that that's what happened, but that's not the point. It's the potential for something like that happening. Mm-hmm. That's so, it tickles me. I was trying desperately, late January, February, to get the shot, and I did. It took some creativity. I was happy to be there. I was thrilled that I was getting the vaccination, that my wife was getting the vaccination. And now things are so cotton picking blasé that I get online and go through a contest that I can presumably win $1 million because of something that I really tried very hard to do back during the winter. I mean, it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Well, there's been some research on what convinces people about this. And unfortunately, I don't think all of our wonderful reasons about moral responsibility are the ones that carry the day. What does seem to carry the day is just a positive testimonial about how liberating and wonderful it is to not be concerned about this, to be free to have gatherings and to mix and mingle and go to worship services and stay for lunch, and not have that really draconian scenario hanging over your head that we did for so long. For me, the thought that I might have to be in a special ward attached to a machine where my beloved husband couldn't come and hold my hand was so horrifying that I was willing to do whatever it took to avoid that scenario. And now that's not something that's being held over my head, and it feels wonderful. So I am so glad I got my vaccination.
There's another tangent to the issue, as I made too. We hear from certain neighborhoods and whatever like that, that the residents do not have the ability, the wherewithal, even if they sign up for the vaccines, to even get there, whatever. That behooves, I think, the common good aspect, again, for the city, the government, whatever it may be, to, again, send people out into the hinterlands, whatever, and to look these people out. Pope Francis has said in regards to like the faith and all this, we need to go out to the fringe areas. We don't sit in our churches and wait for people to come to us. We go out to them. And I think in regards to this whole thing of the virus, it's the same type of principle. We need to go out to the people. I've seen photos and video clips of in different states where people just go through the neighborhood knocking on doors and they have the vaccine. If you haven't got it, they go and fill the paperwork out and give it. Something of that nature needs to be done too, so that everyone who really wants to receive the vaccine can certainly do it. That'll add to this 57% here in Louisville and 74% in the country, et cetera. So
I've been in some major retailers. All the plexiglass is down, number one. Number two, just this week, New York City celebrated and had a big parade for first responders. Meanwhile, in Springfield, Missouri, and other parts of Missouri, they're calling in for help and need reserves and don't have equipment or resources. Right. Did we do too much too soon, or was it just right?
I think we did things in as timely a manner as we possibly could. And for the people who choose not to be vaccinated, Marian, I don't think it's on their radar that they're in harm's way for some reason. It boggles my mind, but they're pretty oblivious to what's happening. And I've seen reports over the news that people who were opposed to the vaccine, and then either they or members of their family who contracted the disease, they're now telling people, I was wrong.
Right.
I'm suffering. I'm seeing my family suffer. Get the vaccine. That's, to me, that's a stronger message than, hey, get a vaccine. You could win $1 million.
All right, let's move on to our second topic on moral side of the news, related to our first. About 46% of Louisville residents have now been fully vaccinated, but Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky tweeted last weekend that members of the U.S. military have contacted him saying they will quit if forced to get the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, members of the military can't quit without being charged with desertion, but Massie says a bill he introduced to the House in June would prohibit the government from requiring members of the armed forces receive the vaccine. So turning to our panel on moral side of the news, the vaccine still seems to be a political football, as we've discussed already a little bit today.
Why do we always have such interesting legislators from the Commonwealth of Kentucky? I was talking about this to someone I know who is an Army veteran, and he intimated to me when I went into the service, they stuck me 47 times with a needle for 48 different things, and I had no choice in the matter whatsoever, and they didn't ask me if I wanted to opt out. I just think this is playing silly political games with life and death situations. Shame on people who do that.
It also concerns me that a representative in the federal government would make statements without being aware of what he's talking about, to be honest. Again, I don't know about the other folks here, but I served in the military during the Vietnam era. And then in boot camp, as you say, Stan, I remember being marched down an aisle with about 6 people on each side with air guns. And we each got in a shot from each one of them on both sides, all the way down, including the Black Plague. I mean, you can't say yay or nay in that. That shows a lack of understanding of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. There are certain privileges and rights in the military that are different than in civilian life. There are certain restrictions, more restricted. But anyway, today I went up and did a little research on the representative and all. He's not my representative, but he has a spotted history, from my perspective, and others would say, in supporting this, supporting that, and not supporting different things. But again, the people who elected him, fine, they elected him, he is their representative. But even still, that doesn't take away from him, as I see it, the responsibility of making inaccurate and illogical and, dare I say, crazy comments like he just made, especially with as we talked about the virus. This is not like a football you just throw around left and right. But he's not the only one. We have senators too in the state who makes kind of crazy statements about the bug as well. So, but I agree with you, Stan. I think it's just it's unconscionable that he would make such statements without verification before opening his mouth.
It's one thing to not get the vaccine if you are a person who wants to stay home and can work from home, who can social distance all the time. But in the military, there is no such thing. You're crammed together like sardines again and again in work situations. Right. So for the good of all, there has to be some protection for your fellow military members. And then you're supposed to be protecting and serving the whole country. So I think if the commander-in-chief and the folks in charge think that the best way to protect everybody is for those shots to be had, then they should be had.
Yeah.
Very good. We have a third topic on our program, moral side of the news today. Kentucky's first baby box was installed this week at Okolona Fire Department Station 1. The box allows parents to safely and anonymously surrender a child without face-to-face interaction. The box is temperature controlled and set with a silent alarm. Okolona Fire Chief Mark Little says a parent can open the box and safely place the baby in a bassinet. That box then automatically locks and notifies firefighters and MetroSafe dispatchers. Turning to our panel on moral side of the news, how do you feel about this new option for parents?
It's about time. First of all, it's tragic that this option needs to be provided, but it needs to be provided. And so it should be the way it's being done. I applaud that. We think of firefighters, and especially we think of firefighters within the context of the WHAS Crusade for Children. And this is yet another way that firefighters are the most humane and humanitarian beings in the world. I mean, they save lives on so many levels and in so many different situations, and how much the more so this situation is a lifesaver.
True.
Well, I agree. I think there are some situations where this could be a real lifesaver. I do want to speak from the heart to parents who are feeling desperate, and I think it's usually the mother. I just want to say, it's normal to feel stretched to the snapping point with a newborn. And this is a really huge decision to give a child away. Remember your options. Remember there are communities there for you. There are churches and mosques and synagogues, community services that could come in and try to support you. If you're feeling super depressed, that's a syndrome and it can be treated. So feeling overwhelmed as a parent is a normal thing. I would just pray for everyone to have the confidence to reach out for help in one way or another. And if that's just not possible in your situation, leads you to need to give up a child, thank goodness, that here's one more example of the community caring for you.
Yes, I can concur with your comments again. I have not read the legislation that governs this whole aspect because, as I understand it, it differs from different states. And anonymity, yes, I think we have anonymity here. I'm not sure. It also regards to help for the parents, not just the mothers, but parents, other fathers, even family members can again, if necessary, make use of this service. I'm reminded, we Christians say we have the Gospels, and the gospel is another word for good news. And I think in regards to medical, ethical issues or moral issues in general, even when we have to, there has to be kind of a form of a discipline. It should be good news in a sense of helping someone out. Like Marian, like you said, in regards to this, we wouldn't want to see this as a norm, but if the necessity is there, then yes, this is an opportunity that the child can not be deserted and die in a trash heap or something of this nature, but can be raised. And I understand, was it in the information or somewhere I read that the child normally in these boxes like this, within about a number of days, there's an adoption possibility for these children already. So, I mean, I see that as good news in the sense gospel, we Christians would say. But it's good news all the way around. I'm glad to see that the community, the state, or whatever, is cooperating with such an adventure.
In the sense of news and good news,
yes.
Now the word has to be spread over and over and over again that this option is available. I truly don't know about the concept of anonymity, because in this age of DNA testing, the option of anonymity flies out the window pretty much. But
you're
it's
suspicious.
Just a thought.
Suspicious.
It's just a thought.
By the way, there's been 75 roughly of these boxes installed nationally across the country, and they cost about $10,000 each. So, Marian, you hit on something that leads me to this question. Does this make it too easy to give up a child? Or obviously this is a decision not to be taken lightly.
I'll tell you, I don't think it's too easy. I think that every time, it seems like at least every week, more than once a week, you hear on the news of some infant being killed by abusive behavior and this has to end. And these, I don't care if it's easy. If it saves the life of one child, it's the right thing to do. Better it should be easy than another child being killed.
My wonderment is, this is for infants, but again, Stan, to your point, there are other older children, as it were, who are being abused and killed as well. Is it a possibility that perhaps our community or our state, whatever we might want to say, could be a forerunner in a sense of, I know there are options out there for older children, but it's not the same situation with anonymity, et cetera. But yes, you're right. I agree with you, Stan. I mean, you see such evilness, to use that terminology, or how do you want to say, weakness being shown. When something of this nature shows itself, it is an opportunity, at least, to, again, see some good news event happening. So,
well, one of the things about all public policies is that you'll always find that there was some surprise incentive or disincentive you didn't think about.
Right.
So I think the main thing will be to monitor this and make adjustments as needed, because it's human nature to always find some way in, through, or around any public policy. So how it actually gets used will have to be monitored and studied. That's okay. I think that public policy should always have an experimental posture, and we can make adjustments as we go along.
And I would venture as well, you mentioned, John, the cost was the $10,000 for this. In modern times, $10,000, I mean, sounds terrible to say, it's not really that much as far as for certain communities. But I would like to see all those communities who are, to use the terminology of pro-life, in a sense of coming forth, to maybe put some of this coin in these boxes. We can have more than one here in the Louisville area, because that would demonstrate the aspect of being, quote, pro-life, as opposed to simply anti-abortion or something of this nature, but just put their money where their mouth is, as the old statement goes. But I think $10,000 we should be able to raise that in a lot of communities, I think, around the area. So
I agree.
Would it be possible that a fire district could ask for a grant from the WHAS Crusade for Children to have one of these boxes in all of their firehouses? I certainly would have no problem whatsoever
good question.
Filling that grant request. And to make it just normal, I think what has to happen is that it is just like you're going to have a fire truck in a fire station. You should have that box in every single fire station in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And maybe perhaps then not just in fire stations, because fire stations are not, we try to centrally locate them to cover the areas, but there are certain areas that perhaps individuals could not get to a fire department or a fire station. But that, again, as Marian said, gives more thought. So let's observe, think, and act after we have observed and thought. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, panel, we have just a couple of minutes left in our program. Any final thoughts this week about things that are on your mind? A little bit of a wild card to you, but just tossing it out to say anything you're thinking about this week.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I have actually been very disturbed this last day or two about the events in Haiti.
Yes.
And I just want to put that out to people. If you're a person of prayer, keep the people of Haiti in your prayers. Their president was killed and assassinated at 1 a.m. in the morning in his bedroom. And unfortunately, always when there's social chaos, the vulnerable are the ones who suffer the most. So you don't want a country where gangs are in charge. There needs to be orderly governance in every country. And so the people of Haiti are in jeopardy, and there needs to be a better way of having leadership transitions in that country.
So to that point, St. Bernadette's, where I've been working last week, they have a sister parish in Haiti, and there's a number. The religious community I was part of at one time has people, boots on the ground, as it were, who are ministering there. But there's kind of a blackout now. We don't know really what's happening at the current time. As the president has said, we do need to understand what's happening before let's just not go in and do things. Let's just unpack what's going on and try to, again, minister to God's children in Haiti in the best way possible.
As we were speaking, something came across the top of my Zoom screen that there have been 6 suspects arrested in the assassination. And as we pray for the people of Haiti, especially pray for the First Lady of Haiti, who was injured in this assassination.
Very good, panel. Prayers to Haiti, and thanks to our panel on this edition of Moral Side of the News, Marian Taylor, Stan Miles, and Tony Smith. You can watch this program again anytime on YouTube. We'll be back again next week with another edition of our program, Moral Side of the News. Until next time, thank you, panel. Have a great week. Stay safe and be well.